Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live, but every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. They were sure to be foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles, so they flew on and on. When they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. There was a nice pond in the public garden with a little island on it. The very place to spend the night, quacked Mr. Mallard. So down they flapped. Next morning they fished for their breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond, but they didn't find much. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on its back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Mallard to be polite. The big bird was too proud to answer, but the people on the boat threw peanuts in the water, so the Mallards followed them all around the pond and got another breakfast, better than the first. "I like this place," said Mrs. Mallard as they climbed out on the bank and waddled along. "Why don't we build a nest and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and people feed us peanuts. What could be better?" "Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted that at last Mrs. Mallard had found a place that suited her. But "Look out," squawked Mrs. Mallard in all of a dither. "You'll get run over." And when she got her breath, she added, "This is no place for babies. With all those horrid things rushing about, we'll have to look somewhere else." So they flew over Beacon Hill and round the State House, but there was no place there. They looked in Louisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. They flew over the Charles River. "This is better," quacked Mr. Mallard. "That island looks like a nice, quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public garden." "Yes," said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. "That looks just like the right place to hatch ducklings." So they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest. And it was only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt, and all their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. But of course they could swim, and one day they swam over to the park on the river bank, and they met a policeman called Michael. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that the Mallards called on Michael every day. After Mrs. Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go to visit Michael anymore, because she had to sit on the eggs to keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water, or to have her lunch, or to count the eggs to make sure they were all there. One day the ducklings hatched out. First came Jack, then Cack, then Lack, then Mack, then Knack, then Owack, and Pack, and Quack. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were bursting with pride. It was great responsibility taking care of many ducklings, and it kept them very busy. One day, Mr. Mallard decided he'd like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like further on. So he said, "I'll meet you in a week in the public garden," he quacked over his shoulder. "Take good care of the ducklings." "Don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children," and she did. She taught them how to swim and dive. She taught them to walk in a line and come when they are called, and to keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. When at last she felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, "Come along, children, follow me." Before you could wink an eyelash, Jack and Cack and Lack and Mack and Owack and Pack and Quack fell into line, just as they had been taught. Mrs. Mallard led the way into the water, and they swam behind her to the opposite bank. There they waddled ashore and waddled along till they came to the highway. Mrs. Mallard stepped out to cross the road. Honk, honk, went the horns on the speeding carts. Quack, went Mrs. Mallard as she tumbled back again. Quack, 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 went Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Oowack, Pack, and Quack, just as loud as their little quackers could quack. The cars kept speeding by and honking, and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings kept right on quack, quack, quacking. They made such a noise that Michael came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. He planted himself in the center of the road, raised one hand to stop the traffic, and then beckoned with the other, the way the policemen do, for Mrs. Mallard to cross over. As soon as Mrs. Mallard and the Ducklings were safe on the other side and on their way down Mount Vernon Street, Michael rushed back to his police booth. He called Clancy at headquarters and said, "There's a family of ducks walking down the street." And Clancy said, "Family of what?" "Ducks," yelled Michael. "Send a police car, quick." Meanwhile, Mrs. Mallard had reached the corner bookshop and turned into Charles Street with Jack, Clack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Owack, Pack, and Quack all marching in line behind her. Everyone stared. An old lady from Beacon Hill said, "Isn't it amazing?" And the man who swept the street said, "Well now, ain't that nice?" And when Mrs. Mallard heard them, she was so proud she tipped her nose in the air and walked along with an extra swing in her waddle. When they came to the corner of Beacon Street, there was the police car with the 4 policemen that Clancy had sent from headquarters. The policemen held back traffic so Mrs. Mallard and the Ducklings could march across the street, right into the public garden. Inside the gate, they all turned round to say thank you to the policemen. The policemen smiled and waved. When they reached the pond and swam across to the little island, there was Mr. Mallard, waiting for them just as he had promised. The Ducklings liked the new island so much that they decided to live there. All day long, they followed the swan boats and ate peanuts. Now that we have finished reading our books, Make Way for Ducklings, we are going to complete this page that is about Michael. We are going to describe Michael on the outside, so what Michael looks like, and Michael on the inside. There is 2 of them, because what I want you to do is to fold your paper right in half, like this. Then you are going to get a pair of scissors, open it back up, and cut just on the black line. That way, when you open it and fold it, you can have a little flap book. So, in the top part of the page, you are going to write what Michael looks like on the outside. So Michael is a police officer. We know that. Let's look at a picture of Michael and what he looks like on the outside. So this is Michael. Michael's wearing a hat. What else can you think of that describes Michael on the outside? You might say what he's wearing. You might say what he looks like. You are going to describe Michael's body on the outside. Then, in the bottom half, you are going to describe Michael on the inside. So what does it mean to describe someone on the inside? It means to describe how they act. So you could say that Michael was very kind because he stopped traffic for our ducklings. What else could you say about Michael? Describe him and write it in your flat book. Make sure when you take a picture to send to Miss Barnes and Miss Sullivan that you show them all of your writing on the inside. All right, friends. See you later.